Have you ever shared something personal only to regret it later? As we age, the value of privacy becomes clearer. There's a wisdom that develops over time, not just about what to say, but what not to say. After 70, the things we share can carry unexpected consequences. Sometimes what feels like an innocent conversation can turn into stress, misunderstanding, or even vulnerability we didn't intend to create. In this video, we're exploring 9 things you should never share with anyone after 70. Not because you need to hide, but because protecting your peace, privacy, and personal safety matters more than ever. These aren't secrets rooted in shame. They're boundaries built from experience. Each one is designed to help you avoid emotional strain, protect your legacy, and preserve your dignity in this important chapter of life. Whether you've always been an open book or you're naturally more reserved, you'll likely find that these 9 things are worth holding closer, because what you don't say can sometimes be just as powerful as what you do. And choosing what to share or not share doesn't make you distant. It makes you wise. Stay with me until the end, because by the time we reach the last point, you may find yourself seeing your everyday conversations in a whole new light, and maybe even setting boundaries you didn't know you needed. Let's begin. Number 1. Your detailed financial status. One of the most important things to protect after 70 is your financial information, not just from strangers, but sometimes even from well-meaning friends or family. Talking openly about how much you have in savings, what your pension looks like, or the full value of your home can seem harmless, especially in casual conversation. But once that information is out there, it's out there, and not everyone handles it with care. There's a subtle shift that happens when people know what you have. Expectations change. Boundaries blur. You might find yourself being asked for help more often, or pressured into opportunities that don't really benefit you. Even well-intentioned loved ones may begin to assume access to things that were never promised, simply because they know what you've got. And beyond that, oversharing your finances can invite manipulation. Scams targeting seniors are on the rise, and the more details someone has about your income, assets, or lifestyle, the easier it becomes for them to tailor their approach. Sometimes, the threat doesn't come from outside your circle. It comes from within. That doesn't mean living in secrecy. It means being discerning. Share financial details only with those who need to know. Your financial advisor, your spouse, or trusted partner, and perhaps one legally designated family member or executor. But casual acquaintances, distant relatives, even overly curious neighbors, they don't need access to those parts of your life. People who age wisely often treat money conversations like medical records, not because they're ashamed, but because they understand the risk of handing over too much information. And that boundary doesn't make you unfriendly. It makes you protected. It means your financial decisions stay yours, and your peace of mind stays intact. Number 2. Your personal medical history. In casual settings, at a certain age, health becomes part of everyday life. Doctor's appointments, new medications, aches and pains, they're real, they're present, and are often shared in conversation without a second thought. But after 70, it's worth pausing before diving into the details of your medical history, especially in casual or non-intimate settings. Not because your story isn't important, but because how it's received can shape how others see and treat you. When you speak openly about every diagnosis, every surgery, every concern, there's a risk that others begin to view you only through that lens. You might notice people becoming overly cautious around you, offering pity instead of respect, or making assumptions about what you can and can't do. And once you're placed in that category of being fragile or in decline, it's surprisingly difficult to step out of it. There's also the emotional toll. Constantly retelling your health journey can keep you tethered to worry, fear, or even identity based on illness. And when those details are shared with people who aren't close, it can lead to uncomfortable comments, unsolicited advice, or even judgment you never asked for. You might hear things like, "Should you really be traveling?" Or, "Maybe you shouldn't be living alone anymore." All from people who barely know the full picture. Instead, choose to share selectively with trusted loved ones, healthcare professionals, or those walking a similar path. Yes, talk freely. There's comfort in connection. But with others, you can simply say, "I'm managing some things, but I'm doing all right." And leave it at that. You're not hiding. You're preserving your autonomy. People who age with grace often speak with intention. They know when to open up and when to keep certain truths tucked away. Not out of pride, but out of wisdom. Because not every detail deserves to be on display. And protecting your narrative is part of protecting your strength. Number 3, your private regrets or past mistakes. Everyone has chapters they'd rather not read out loud. But after 70, there's a deeper layer to what we choose to revisit. And more importantly, what we choose to reveal. Regret has a strange way of lingering, especially when shared in the wrong setting. And while honesty and vulnerability have their place, constantly recounting your past mistakes can do more harm than healing, especially when those stories are handed to people who haven't earned your trust. When you speak about regrets, choices you didn't make, chances you missed, people you hurt, you open a tender place in yourself. And if the listener meets that moment with judgment, disinterest, or even casual dismissal, it can reinforce pain instead of offering relief. What was meant to be freeing becomes another weight to carry. You may notice that when you share these things with someone who doesn't hold them with care, it changes how they see you. They may treat you differently, define you by a single story, or begin to overstep with advice, opinions, or assumptions about who you are today. But you are not your past. You are not a list of wrong turns or missed opportunities. There's great wisdom in knowing which parts of your story are meant to be shared, and which are meant to be processed privately, or with someone truly safe. That might be a therapist, a spiritual advisor, or a lifelong friend who knows your heart. But with others, it's okay to simply say, "There are things I've learned the hard way," and leave it there. The older you get, the more you understand that peace isn't found in constant confession. It's found in perspective, in realizing that your past shaped you, but it doesn't own you. That your mistakes may explain a few things, but they don't define the whole. People who walk through their 70s and beyond with steady dignity tend to carry their past lightly, not because they're hiding it, but because they've made peace with it. And they've learned that not every story is meant for every audience. Number 4, your will or inheritance plans with non-legal parties. There's something deeply personal and often deeply emotional about what you choose to leave behind after 70. Many people start thinking more seriously about their will, their assets, and how they want their legacy to be passed on. But here's the truth. Unless someone is legally involved in managing that process, it's almost always better to keep those details private. When you start sharing who's getting what, how much or when, you unintentionally open the door to conflict. Expectations form. Comparisons begin. People start wondering why one person was chosen over another, or why something was divided the way it was. Even in close families, even with good intentions, money and inheritance can stir up jealousy, entitlement, and misunderstanding faster than almost any topic. What's more, sharing this kind of information before things are finalized or without legal context can backfire. You might change your mind later. You might revise your will. You might discover circumstances you didn't anticipate. And when those details have already been spoken aloud, changing them can feel like betrayal, even if it's the right decision for you. That's why people who age wisely tend to keep these matters within a small trusted circle. They work with an attorney. They choose an executor. They document their wishes clearly and legally. And they limit casual conversations that could complicate things down the road. It's not secrecy. It's stewardship. Sharing your plans with everyone may feel transparent, but it often invites unnecessary pressure. When you prioritize clarity and legal protection over open discussion, you protect not just your assets, but your peace of mind and your family's long-term relationship. Number 5. Your emotional vulnerabilities with untrustworthy people. There's a special kind of strength that comes with age. The strength to know when to open your heart and when to protect it. After 70, emotional clarity becomes even more important. You've seen enough to know that not everyone who listens deserves to hear what's deepest in you. While it's healthy to talk about your feelings, sharing emotional vulnerabilities with people who haven't earned your trust can leave you exposed in ways that hurt more than help. Sometimes the person seems kind on the surface. They nod, they ask questions, they act interested. But later, you hear your private worries passed around like casual gossip. Or worse, your fears are used against you. To manipulate, to control, or to create a version of you that isn't fair or accurate. You might mention how lonely you've been feeling, or that you're scared of losing independence, or that certain family dynamics weigh heavily on your heart. And if those words fall into the wrong hands, they can be misinterpreted or turned into a story that paints you as unstable, incapable, or overly emotional. People who age gracefully learn to share their heart with care. They don't stop being open. They just become discerning. They know that vulnerability isn't about telling everyone everything. It's about knowing who's safe, who's consistent, who holds your truth gently, and respects what you've shared. It's okay to take your time to test the waters, to observe how someone handles your small shares before you hand them the deeper ones. And if someone has already shown they gossip, twist your words, or use your feelings to gain control, you owe them nothing more. Your emotional well-being is not their business. Your heart has been through enough at this stage. It deserves safety, kindness, and maturity in return. And the less you share with people who haven't earned that place in your life, the more space you create for those who have. Number 6. Your relationship issues with your spouse or partner. Every relationship has its ups and downs, even the strong ones. And after decades together, it's normal for disagreements, frustrations, or even old wounds to surface from time to time. But once you reach your 70s, one of the wisest choices you can make is to protect your relationship by not airing out those struggles with people who aren't directly involved or who can offer meaningful help. It might feel relieving in the moment to vent about your spouse to a friend, a neighbor, or even a family member. Maybe you share that you've been feeling unheard, or that a certain behavior keeps bothering you. But what often happens next is this. The listener forms an opinion, and once that opinion takes root, it changes how they see your partner. Even if things improve between you later on, what was once a private disagreement now becomes part of your public story. People begin to make assumptions. They may offer unsolicited advice, or worse, they may start taking sides without knowing the full picture. And then that can put even more strain on a relationship you've worked hard to build and maintain. There's also another layer. Sharing relationship frustrations too freely can sometimes keep you stuck in them. When you vent but don't take action, the story hardens. You relive the conflict over and over instead of moving through it. But when you choose discretion, when you bring those concerns to your partner directly, or to a counselor, or to someone truly objective, you open the door for healing instead of judgment. Couples who endure over time tend to keep certain things sacred. Not secret, but sacred. They know that just because you're upset doesn't mean the world needs to know, and they understand that protecting the image of your partner, even during hard seasons, is a form of long-term love. So speak up when something's wrong, but speak wisely. Protect your connection from unnecessary noise, and trust that some conversations, the most important ones, are meant to be had only with the person they're truly about. Number 7. Your views on your adult children's choices. As a parent, it's natural to care deeply about your children, even when they're well into adulthood. You want the best for them. You want to protect them. And sometimes you see choices they're making about parenting, relationships, finances, or lifestyle that don't sit right with you. But after 70, one of the most challenging yet important skills to master is knowing when to stay silent. Sharing your opinions about your adult children's lives, especially with others, can backfire quickly. What you intend as concern may be heard as criticism. What you see as wisdom may be received as judgment. And when those opinions get back to your children, even through innocent channels, it can create distance, resentment, or even long-term strain in the relationship. You may feel tempted to talk about it with a friend or a sibling. I just don't understand why Michael quit his job. Or, I wish Lisa would raise the kids differently. But once that leaves your lips, it lives in someone else's mind. And their perspective of your child can change forever. Worse, if word gets back to them, the trust you've built can take a serious hit. People who maintain strong relationships with their grown children know how to practice emotional restraint. They remind themselves that advice not asked for often feels like control. They wait for the invitation. They speak gently when it comes. And above all, they keep private opinions where they belong. Private. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start trusting. Trusting that your children are living their own lives, learning in their own way, and trusting that your quiet support, your consistent presence, and your respectful distance often speak louder than any opinion ever could. Your wisdom still matters, but when offered at the right time, in the right way, it lands with love instead of resistance. And in the long run, that respect builds the kind of connection that lasts. Number 8, your passwords, PINs, or important access information. After 70, managing your digital and financial security becomes more important than ever. But so does knowing who to trust with your sensitive information. Sharing passwords, banking access, or key personal data, even with family, should never be done casually. Not because you expect people to misuse it, but because the risk grows the more widely it's shared. It might feel convenient to give your grandson your email password so he can help you reset something. Or maybe you've told a neighbor where you keep your checkbook in case of an emergency. But once that information leaves your control, you can't always predict where it will go or how it might be used. Elder fraud is real, and it doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it's a family member who feels entitled. Sometimes it's a friend who's fallen on hard times. Other times, it's simply a mistake. Someone sharing your information with someone else, thinking they're helping. And before you know it, your privacy is compromised. The wisest approach is to keep your passwords and sensitive data stored securely and share them only through legally protected means. That might include naming a trusted power of attorney, setting up access with your bank for a specific representative, or using a secure password manager where information can be safely retrieved if needed. People who maintain their independence later in life often have one thing in common. They stay in control of their information, not through secrecy, but through structure. They prepare their documents, they document, and they plan ahead, and they avoid handing over keys to their personal world unless absolutely necessary. There's nothing paranoid about protecting your digital life. It's part of protecting your dignity, your assets, and your autonomy. And the fewer people who know how to access your sensitive records, the more secure your future becomes. You're not being guarded. You're being wise. And that wisdom pays off in peace of mind and in staying firmly in charge of what's yours. Number 9, your plans to move, downsize, or change your living situation. In your 70s and beyond, the idea of changing where or how you live becomes a very personal decision. Maybe you've thought about moving closer to family, downsizing to something more manageable, or transitioning into a retirement community. But here's where things get tricky. Sharing those plans too early, and with too many people, can invite a storm of pressure before you're even ready. What begins as a passing thought, maybe I'll sell the house in a year or two, can quickly snowball into advice, assumptions, or even unsolicited help. Family might push for quicker action. Friends might start treating you differently, as if you're already halfway out the door. And worse, someone might begin making plans for you instead of with you. The moment you share something as big as a living change, people naturally project their own fears, desires, or opinions onto it. Too far, you'll regret selling. You should move in with us. All well-meaning perhaps, but not always helpful. And if you're still in the decision-making stage, that noise can cloud your thinking and create unnecessary tension. That's why so many people who age with clarity choose to process these decisions privately first. They journal, they pray, they talk with one or two deeply trusted voices, not the whole circle. They gather information, weigh their options, and move at their own pace. And when they're ready to act, then they share. Announcing plans prematurely, especially big ones, can turn your personal process into a public debate, and the more voices involved, the more complicated it becomes. But by holding your plans close until you feel confident and clear, you preserve the peace and agency that this stage of life deserves. You don't owe anyone early access to your process. When the time is right, you'll let the right people in, and those who truly care about your well-being will respect your pace and your privacy as you shape the next chapter of your life. Final thoughts. As we wrap up this video, take a moment to think about what we've explored together. These 9 things may seem small in isolation, but when you look closer, they all come back to one core idea: protecting your peace. After 70, your time, energy, and emotional safety are more valuable than ever, and knowing what not to share can be just as powerful as knowing what to say. Which one of these stood out to you the most? Have you caught yourself oversharing something that later didn't sit right? Or have you learned through hard experience that certain things are better kept sacred? You're not alone in that. Many of us reach this stage of life and realize that boundaries aren't about building walls. They're about creating space where respect and clarity can live. Sharing is still beautiful, but now it's about sharing wisely with the right people in the right moments. That discernment isn't cold or distant. It's one of the warmest, wisest gifts you can give yourself. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share one thing you learned today and how you plan to use it in your life. Your thoughts are important to us, so don't hesitate to share them. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.